with my great pleasure that I call upon one of our members who is Noble Biz, who is sponsoring our keynote today. And I'd like to bring up to the podium Ted Fortezzo, a longtime contributor to the industry and with Noble Biz.
Thanks, Lori. What a great long introduction for me. Kidding. I've known Lori for a long, long time. So, I'm Ted Fortezzo. I'm the Executive Vice President of Noble Biz. Real pleasure to be here. I've been in this industry for about 20 years. Most of that time was spent with West Corporation and Alorica. I joined Noble Biz in January of 2017. So, relatively new to that company, but loving being in that side of the business. For those of you who don't know who Noble Biz is, we are a contact center technology provider. We provide world-class voice services, which is really inbound and outbound technology services, telco. We do cloud contact center technology services as well. We provide a platform for doing dialing blended services. And we do have an easy-to-use business intelligence software platform as well. It allows you to look across your contact centers, across your vendors, and really understand what your business is doing. So we're here in DC really because we're interested in what's happening in this city regarding what's happening really with FTC and the FCC. We're very interested in how they're fighting illegal robocalls. We think that's just of paramount importance to our industry, and it's impacting how consumers are getting information from legitimate businesses. It's impacting the bottom line of legitimate businesses and the clients that we all serve, a lot of us serve, and some of you folks that are out here that we're partners with today. We think that the actions that the FTC and the FCC are taking are warranted, and we absolutely support them. We think it's important, though, to understand what those actions are and what that collateral damage is that's really being caused to our industry as well, our legitimate businesses, and to the consumers. You know, they're missing out on some important phone calls sometimes, or they're mistrusting the calls that they're getting. So how do we deal with that? Well, I'm really happy to share, and hopefully you guys saw in your syllabus, that Noble Biz is now holding hands with Numerical and Rebecca Johnson's company. And the thought there is that we're going to bring to our clients the opportunity to understand more about the contact center programs that are going on in their buildings and with their vendors, how they're being impacted by these rules, and then just as importantly, how to prescribe real actions that you can take to either mitigate some of those challenges or increase the overall productivity and the performance KPIs that are coming out of those programs. So we're excited about that. Hopefully you guys will see that brochure within the syllabus there and talk to us about that later. Keith Weinberg's here from Noble Biz, Rebecca Johnson's in the back, I'll be here, and Christian Montez will be joining us as well. So, all that said, commercial aside, all done, I want to share with you guys who's going to be speaking to us today. We've got Amy Walter here to speak with us. And over the past 19 years, Amy has built a reputation as an accurate, objective, and insightful political analyst with unparalleled access to campaign insiders and decision makers within the political landscape. She is the national editor of the Cook Political Report and the former political director of ABC News. And you've probably seen her on TV if you watch Meet the Press, or Fox's Special Report, or CBS's Face the Nation, where she's a regular panelist. She also provides political analysis every Monday evening for PBS in their news hour. And I had the opportunity to visit with Amy just a few minutes ago. Incredibly insightful. She knew about my races in Texas. She has just great insight and some great stories to share. So please welcome Amy Walter.
Hi guys, good morning. Welcome to Crazy Town, USA, Washington, DC. Even for us, this is crazy. Like, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm terrified every day to stare at my phone. And for those of you who made what you thought was a great decision to set up alerts, news alerts on your phone, I just want to make sure I'm on top of all the important issues when I'm in meetings. That was a terrible idea, right? Like your phone is constantly like, and it's really hard to know what's important and what's not. What does it matter? What doesn't? This week especially, as we go into the Supreme Court may or may not have hearings, trying to figure out how we navigate all of this. And I think what's become even more difficult is trying to do this in an era where the intensity and the vitriol is more, and the partisanship is just so insidious. Right? It's difficult to have even a basic conversation about politics without it getting into something pretty emotionally fraught. I don't know how many of you are looking forward to Thanksgiving this year, but I know if it's the past couple of Thanksgivings, it's maybe awkward once again. The number of people I have talked to who have either completely ceased conversation with friends and family, have axed people from their Facebook list. Facebook used to be this nice little escape for me where I'd be like, oh, I just want to check in on my friends' kids, and I can't now, right? It's like opening a minefield and you're trying to get around it. And it's even harder when we live in a world where it's understandable why people say, well, I don't believe this, or I don't know this is true. Is it fake news? Is there a political agenda behind it? Because it's gotten easier than ever to just get isolated in our own little safe bubbles of news and information, thanks to cable TV and the 6 million choices you have there, the internet, social media. So trying to figure out what matters and what doesn't, what's true and what's not, is tougher than ever. What I'm going to do, well, I do this every day, and what I want to do today is to get us away from some of the shiny craziness and to look at the basics, the fundamentals. What I think really the scaffolding about this time that we're in, around that scaffolding is important. But if you don't understand what the fundamentals are, it's really hard to make sense of where we are today and where I think we're going to be in the future. And here's how I look at this upcoming election. We're a little over a month away, and here's what we knew before the president was even sworn in. All of us who cover politics were saying the same thing. The fundamentals of what the map looks like in 2018 for who controls the House and the Senate favor Republicans. The Senate map is very, very difficult for Democrats. They have to defend 26 states, Republicans only 9. Those 26 states, 10 of them, Donald Trump carried. Hillary Clinton only carried 1 of the Republicans' states. Democrats are going to spend their entire campaign on defense. And by the way, of those 10 states Trump carried, 5 of them he carried by 19 points or more. Right? These are the West Virginia and North Dakota. These are not easy places for Democrats to win, even in a good year. But how are Democrats going to hold them when they are so supportive, when they voted overwhelmingly for President Trump, in some cases by much bigger margins than Romney won those states when they were running before. So we knew that was challenging. We knew the House map was also challenging for a couple of reasons. The first is the way that the lines were drawn. Remember, Democrats lost not just Congress, the House in 2010, but they lost state legislative seats, record number of seats, governorships. So Republicans drew a lot of these districts in key states. The other challenge for Democrats is they tend to self-sort in and around urban and inner suburban areas. They are overrepresented in urban areas, underrepresented in exurban and rural areas. And my colleague has said, and this was something of conventional wisdom, again, even before Donald Trump was sworn into office, was here are the following ways Democrats could ever win back control of the House. Number 1, they just wait until 2020, hope that they win enough governorships in 2018 and state legislatures that they can at least mitigate some of the line drawing advantages that Republicans have had. Okay? Number 2, they run a nationwide relocation program for their voters. Okay? They take all of those voters in and around the urban, suburban areas and find a way to encourage them to get out, right? Maybe put some hot yoga studios or kombucha stands, Whole Foods, move all of the like organic Whole Foods market scenarios out of here. Get those millennials out to North Dakota or Fort Wayne, Indiana, right? That's what you could do. Change everything. Or the only other option was Republicans have a president in the midterm year. There's a Republican president in the midterm year who's super unpopular. So they didn't get number 2, but they got number 3, right? The president right now is sitting somewhere around 40%. And if you look at the average of all the polls that are out there right now, and you say, well, why does it really matter how President Trump is viewed, right? This isn't an election about President Trump, he's not on the ballot. But what we know about midterm elections is the following. Midterm elections have been, I'm going all the way back to the Civil War, really bad for the party in the White House. Actually, let me amend that. There are 3 categories that you can fall into as the party in the White House in a midterm year. Think of it sort of like Starbucks. It's either tall or grande or venti, all right? Tall is, we had kind of a bad year. We lost a few seats. Grande is, we lost a lot of seats, but we're still hanging in there. Venti is, oh my God, we lost everything, and I'm sobbing in the corner, rocking myself out of fear and desperation. The party in the White House always loses seats. There have been 3 times in history that the party in the White House hasn't lost seats in the House. So the issue was never, are they going to lose seats? It's how many are they going to lose? And the best correlation between seats lost, to know how many seats are lost, is how well the president is viewed. What do people think of the job that he's doing? And if you go back, again, historically speaking, when the president's over 50% in his approval rating, people tend to, voters tend not to punish the party in power as much. Doesn't mean they don't lose any seats, but they don't lose as many. When the president is under 50%, they lose, on average, this is going back about 50 years, 40 seats in the House and 5 seats in the Senate. Now, how does that actually work? If you go back and you look at where Barack Obama was in 2010, he was at 45% approval rating going into the election. They lost 63 seats in the House that year. George W. Bush going into 2006 was at 39%. They lost 30 seats. Now, George W. Bush in his first midterm, remember this is the midterm immediately after the September 11th attacks. His approval rating was in the 60s. Republicans actually picked up 5 seats that year. The only other time before George W. Bush in the modern era that the party in the White House picked up seats was, you guessed it, when Bill Clinton was being impeached. Because that's always when people are like, absolutely, I want to support the president's party as he's being impeached. But the president going into the 1998 midterm elections had a 65% approval rating, right? And they picked up a handful of seats in that midterm election. So you can see that there is a very good correlation there. But there's something else between the president and what what is important to watch beyond just his overall approval ratings. And that's the intensity behind that. What the president has decided to do from the day he was sworn in until now is to spend his political energy, capital, focus, tweeting, policy, all of it, on catering to the people who already liked him and voted for him, and not on expanding that pool. Right? This is a guy who was elected in 2016 without winning the popular vote, by winning the Electoral College by a significant margin, but in terms of the number of electoral votes, but by a small number of actual votes, about 80,000 votes spread over those 3 last important, those 3 swing states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And he was also the least popular person in terms of like how people felt about him ever elected to office in like the history of this country. Now, to be fair, had Hillary Clinton won, she would have won the title of the least popular person ever elected to office, right? So one of them had to win. We all knew that. And they both were going to win that record. But I remember thinking about this and talking to people about this before the election. Like, if Hillary wins, here's what she's going to have to do. She's going to have to immediately go on a 50-state tour trying to shore up her credibility and her favorability, right? Go into all those places that voted against her. People are, still feeling negatively about her. Try to build up that base, because she would have won by a very narrow margin and being very unpopular. The president had the same challenge, right? What do you do? This is a really, I won by just this very little bit. I've got this base of support that really likes me, but I should probably try to expand that. But that's not what he decided to do. Instead, he has doubled and tripled and quadrupled down. So in that sense, he's made his base very happy, and they haven't abandoned him. And I want to say, this is quite remarkable how well he's kept this Republican Party together, because I didn't believe it could happen. I remember, again, 2016, writing multiple times, okay, this is it. We're done, the Republican Party's over. It's gonna crack up, it's gonna be dissolved, right? We did it after he said that John McCain wasn't a war hero, right? Well, that's the last straw. Good luck for him getting the nomination. Oh, no. It happened at the 2016 convention. Remember, we had all kinds of Republicans not exactly embracing him, including Ted Cruz, who was almost thrown off the stage. Remember when he was like, yeah, I gave a whole big, nice, long speech. By the way, I don't really support him. Okay, bye. Remember, he did that whole big, breakup, public breakup. Looked like the party maybe was going to fall apart then. It didn't. Access Hollywood. Okay, that's it. That's where it's all going to fall apart. Republicans are going to absolutely abandon him. Oh, no. And since he's come into office, there were multiple places where it looked like the party might come apart, but it always come back together. But he has helped to keep and consolidate that Republican base, which is quite remarkable, not just for the fact that, as I said, it looked multiple times like this was a party in crisis, but that he's not a Republican. He doesn't come from this party, right? He's our first true independent president, and yet somehow he's been able to consolidate a Republican Party pretty handily underneath his brand of republicanism. So I think that's impressive. The challenge, though, when you are basing your presidency on keeping your base, your voters really engaged and really excited, is that, guess what? It gets the other side really fired up too. Okay? And this time, the other side isn't represented by the second most unliked person in America named Hillary Clinton. This time, it's just a referendum on Donald Trump. You either are for him or you're against him. And right now, the people who are against him really don't like him, okay? There's a group, as I said, there's the president now sitting at something like a 40%, 41% approval rating. The people who approve of the president, they like him. And about 70% say they strongly approve of him. That's a pretty good percentage, right? 70% of the people who like you really like you, meaning these are the people that will walk over hot coals for you. But when you look at the larger majority of people who say they disapprove of the president, over 80% of them strongly disapprove of him. Okay? So the people that support him, they love him, but not as much as the people who don't like him despise him. Okay? And that intensity matters. Here's why it matters. And this is why it undermined many of the structural advantages that Republicans came into this election with. Because it fired up Democrats to to go and run for office. You have a record number of Democrats who said, you know what, this guy's making me insane. I've never done like this before. I've never run for Congress. I've never thought about running for Congress, but I'm doing it. I am dying to find this actual number. I know it's out there because it's on the internet and everything on the internet is true. But I did read that Democrats have filed a candidate in every single district, but about 2 or 3. That is a record. That means that you have Democrats running in districts that they have no business running in, and they're not going to win. They're not even going to come close. But that's how engaged and inspired they are. And what it's also done is it's opened up a lot of districts that wouldn't have been considered in play, that hadn't been, that Democrats hadn't gone after. And so it took what was a very small, manageable group of districts that Republicans had to defend and expanded it. You have Democrats raising an unbelievable amount of money from online, mostly from online small donor folks. 55 Democratic candidates, many of them first-time candidates, outraised the Republican incumbent. That is unheard of. You're a Republican incumbent, your party controls the House, the Senate, and the White House. You should have all kinds of money that is off limits to the minority party. You should be able to outraise anyone. And yet, 55 of them got outraised by Democratic candidates. And what we're finding then is that instead of just having this narrow, as I said, a narrow number of seats in play, Democrats have put 40 Republican seats in danger. If we look at the bigger universe, I mean, 40 is about, those are the most vulnerable of vulnerable Republican incumbents. Democrats only need to win 23 of those. So a little more than half. That's not a slam dunk, but it's a heck of a lot easier than trying to win 23 out of 30 or 23 out of 25. The other challenge, I think, that we know about enthusiasm and intensity is how it has played out thus far. I think it's fair to ask the question, why do we believe that all of these polls are actually accurate? Didn't we kind of think that in 2016, right? Weren't we all going on the like, well, if you base it on what we're seeing in the data, there's, 87% chance that, whatever the numbers were going into the election, that Hillary Clinton was going to win. It's a very fair question. So I look at the polling and the data that's coming in, but I also look at the results of elections that have already happened. And there have been a number of those. We've had special elections, we've had a gubernatorial race in Virginia and New Jersey. And what we're seeing there is Democrats simply outperforming in election after election what they normally would be getting by about 8 points. Just to give you a sense of what that means to outperform your average number of 8 points. If Democrats did this in every congressional district in the country, this 8-point swing, they would pick up 81 seats. Okay, that's not going to happen. It doesn't work that way. You don't just get 8 points handed to you because you have an advantage in the intensity. But it just goes to show that this is playing out both in the polling data as well as on the ground. And so I think of it as much more real than it is just theoretical. If there's a speed bump for Democrats, there actually are 2 of them. On the House side, it's that the intensity and energy right now is driven not solely, but primarily by women, especially by suburban women who live in districts that traditionally have been pretty Republican. Suburbs outside of Denver, or Chicago, or Orange County, or New York, New Jersey. These women voted against Donald Trump. They didn't really like him then, and they really do not like him now. And they are driving a movement from those suburban communities away from Republicans writ large. But there's another group of voters that Democrats had hoped, and continue to hope, are going to be the base of their party for the future. Younger voters, especially younger voters of color. These voters, they turned out, remember they were the Obama coalition? These were the folks that were going to turn the country into a permanent Democratic majority. Obama had cracked the code. These voters tend to turn, and have only turned out, consistently for one person, Barack Obama. That's why they call it the Obama coalition. They tend not to vote for any other Democrat. Are they going to turn out in this election? And for Trump, the question is, are the voters that turned out for him? Remember, he ran as much against Washington as anything else, right? Come vote for me. I know you might not have voted for other Republicans in the past because you thought they were part of the whole swampy system. Right? Romney, McCain, all those guys, they didn't really speak to you. I'm speaking to you, and I'm going to take this all on. I'm not like them. I'm not your typical politician. And it's true, that's what he did, and that's why they like him. But they also still really hate Washington. And so this is the challenge the president's in right now, which is I've got to motivate those people who I have actively given the message that Washington is broken and Washington stinks. And then I have to tell them to go vote for those same people, right? It's like, look, you guys, here's the deal. Washington does suck, but you got to vote for the people who suck. Because if not, then they're going to come impeach me, right? If you don't vote for the Republicans, who you hate, and so do I, by the way, because they're all terrible. But you got to do it, because if not, those Democrats are going to come after me. Right? Once again, the president has found a way to make it all about. Yeah, right? It's not about what the Republicans have done that's good. It's as much about what the Democrats are going to do that's bad. Right? Is that enough to motivate that base? Now, the Senate's a bit of a different story. As I said, you started off with a map that was so tilted away from the party, from the Democratic Party. So many states that they had to defend that Trump carried. But here's how that's changed. The irony is that as the president has kept his base united, and united against heretics as well. Right? John McCain. The president's feud with John McCain has also shaped the way that Republicans view John McCain. When John McCain passed away, his approval rating among Republicans in the state of Arizona was 30%. There's no way that Jeff Flake, another one of the Trump critics, also from Arizona, could win a primary. His approval rating is somewhere near that number in the state of Arizona. Bob Corker, retiring from Tennessee, another Trump critic, no way he could win a primary because he has dared to criticize the president. So those two decide, well, I can't win a primary. It's not really worth the fight. I'm going to retire. Well, guess what? Democrats have a very good chance of picking up both of those seats. So you got rid of your heretics, but you could end up getting Democrats. You know, these guys may criticize you publicly, but they were voting with you 90% of the time. Now you're going to get two people who are going to criticize you openly and vote against you all the time. Is that a really good trade-off? I don't know. The other question that bears asking is whether Americans going into this election in these red states, many of them still like the president. In North Dakota, the president still has an approval rating close to 60%. West Virginia, it's over 60%. Now, in times past, when voters in these sorts of states, whether it was they were overwhelmingly Democrat but had a Republican senator or overwhelmingly Republican with a Democratic senator, would say, well, I think it's good that we keep our person in the Senate as like a check on the person in the White House. It's always good to have somebody who's just keeping an eye out on that person who's sitting in the White House. And if they're of the opposite party, there's a better chance they will. And we've lost that check and balance over the years. Voters are voting overwhelmingly for one team or the other. They're not splitting their vote like they once did in 2016. Almost every senator, actually every Senate candidate, state that was always competitive, Nevada, and then hold on to those other 5 very difficult red states, you flip the Senate. You lose one of those, pick up 3, there you go. It's also just as likely that after all is said and done and the billions of dollars that are spent, the Senate looks exactly as it does today, 51-49 Republican. Or it moves 1 seat, 50-50, which, you know, that's fun times. You get the vice president every day, breaking ties, you get a lot of negotiations, you have the threat of one member switches parties, right? You're going to be on party switch watch all the time. This happened most recently in 2000 with Jim Jeffords from Vermont, and switched parties, changing control of the Senate. So at the end of the day, as we look around at what are the likely possibilities, the House, I'm not going to say it's 100% certainty, but the House it's pretty well going to flip. Right? The odds are very, very, very good that it flips. This is a question of by how many seats. And the Senate, I would still give an edge to Republicans, but depending on the mood out there, and depending on, again, there are states, we've talked about Texas, we can get into that a little more specifically, but a place like Texas that wasn't supposed to be even on the map, right? This is Texas, for God's sake, is now incredibly close. That Democrats could end up with a sweep, the House and the Senate. What would that mean, one or both changing from Republican control to Democrat? You know, part of it is, let's just realize that 2 things are going to happen. The first is there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure on Democrats in the House to do something about Trump, right? This was a referendum on Trump. This was the energy about voters, that voters on the Democratic side have about this president. They want to hold him to account. But how much bloodlust do Democrats actually have? And what tolerance do voters have for Democrats not going straight in for impeachment? Okay. Now, when you talk to Democrats, they'll tell you, look, we are much more disciplined than people give us credit for. Okay? We are not going to take the majority and then 5 minutes later put articles of impeachment on the desk. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to hold the president to account, i.e., we can have a whole lot of hearings, we can send out a lot of subpoenas, we can make their life really miserable, but we don't have to impeach right away. Right? But what message is it that Democrats want to send to voters? That they're all running on a message of we're going to break the stalemate, we're going to work in a bipartisan way, our job is to get things done, we're not here just to play zero-sum politics. That's who these Democrats are, that's how they're running. How does that translate? And of course, it's very difficult if the Senate is still in Republican hands, obviously the White House is still in Republican hands. It's hard to get anything done when you're the majority in the House without having either one of those things. But did they at least give the appearance of trying? The Senate will be focused almost exclusively, if it stays in Republican hands, on continuing to get judges appointed onto the courts, specifically the lower courts, where now a record number of judges have been nominated and have been voted on. The president has been able to get more judges on the lower courts than any first-time president in modern history. And Republicans are going to want to continue that. But let's also be clear about a couple of things. The first is, even with the House and the Senate, most of what's happened for this Trump White House, the success this Trump White House has had, or at least the things that the Trump White House is the most proud of, have happened through executive orders. Okay? Those have happened without the legislators. This is trade policy, whether it's pulling out of TPP or pulling out of Paris Climate, on immigration, right? Whether it's the Muslim ban or whether it's new rules on number of refugees allowed or new rules for what happens at the border with minors and families. This all came through the White House. This did not come through legislation. I think that's going to continue regardless. The other thing that's going to be important to understand about what happens in 2019 is that I'm going to guarantee you about, maybe I'll give it 24 hours, maybe not. There will be about 56 Democrats who announce for president, okay? As soon as those polls close, everybody's going to be focused on running for president. It's like, okay, well that was done, now I'm going to go get my campaign ready. And if you look at the list, I'm trying to keep a list of all the Democrats who are thinking about running for president. It's about 56,000 pages of people that have either showed some interest, who could be potentially interested, or are long shots in this. And that's the second most asked question I get after who's going to win in 2018 is who's going to be the Democratic nominee? Which, honestly, if I knew that, I would not be here. I would be in Las Vegas because I would be really good at this stuff and I would be using it for much better purposes than politics. But a couple of things about that. The first is, in 2016, after the election was over, I was cleaning out my desk. And I found this opposition research book that this Democratic group sent around to all reporters in early 2015 that had every potential Republican candidate in there. Like anybody you could think of that was maybe thinking about running for president, and all the terrible things about them, what they've done, how they voted, how they governed. You want to guess who wasn't in that book? Yeah, Donald J. Trump was not even listed in there, right? So I say that as a word of warning about trying to pick exactly who this person is going to be. I think it's more important to think of it stylistically than it is thinking about the person. So Democrats are going to have a choice in 2020. It seems to kind of come down to this. Do you want someone who's going to be like Donald Trump, but on your side? As a headline today in Politico put it, Democrats in 2016 went by the mantra that Michelle Obama outlined at the convention that year, when they go low, we go high. There are many Democrats right now who say, no, when they go low, we go lower. Or, this is the headline, when they go low, we kick them in the nuts. Okay, that's our mantra, right? Forget this whole, we're gonna rise above, we're better than that, no, that doesn't win, okay? What wins is playing like Trump does. You're not gonna beat Trump unless you play like Trump. That's sort of the Michael Avenatti strategy, right? Who is now, by the way, beyond representing Stormy Daniels and potentially another woman in the Brett Kavanaugh case and getting himself on television all the time, is also strolling through Iowa and South Carolina and New Hampshire, right? Then there's the, we don't have to act like Donald Trump. Right? We're not gonna get in Twitter wars, we're not gonna do the Trump sort of behavior. But the only way you're gonna be Donald Trump is you've got to be as disruptive as he is, right? He changed the calculus for politics, not just by the way he talked and tweeted, but because he was willing to really shake things up, because he admitted that the system was broken, that it was corrupted, and the only way we're gonna change it is to literally turn over the cart. But we mean it, Democrats are gonna say, we mean it in a very different way. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, right? Think of that piece of the party. What we're gonna say is, Donald Trump, yeah, he disrupted it for the worse, right? He's made things that much worse for fill in the blank. We're gonna make it that much better, but we're gonna be radical. We're not just gonna go around the edges. That was the Hillary Clinton thing. Oh, we're gonna make a little change here to Obamacare. We're gonna make a little change here on trade. We're gonna make a little change here on how we view, right, the sort of capitalist corporate structure. Oh no, we're going all in. That's what voters want to see. That's what they're gonna get energized about. Or there's a third model. That's sort of the Joe Biden model, I would argue, or Michael Bloomberg, who's also very seriously thinking about this, or a governor, low-key sort of governors like John Hickenlooper from Colorado who do the, whoa, no. Voters are not going to want, either one, for us to act like Trump. They're going to be really sick of this. They're sick of it now, they're going to be even more fed up with it in 2 years. They don't want an overcorrection. That's not what voters are saying. They don't want us to go way over to the Bernie Elizabeth Warren. They just want us to get back to normal. Can't we just be normal? Can't we just not have all of this drama for like 5 minutes, for God's sakes, right? People just want to live their lives. They want things to get better, but they don't want to blow everything up. And that's where we're going to go. And so those are all the forces that are going to be pushing and pulling at Democrats, while, by the way, the president will be stirring the pot and tweeting and doing what he does very, very well. And so I think that's a better way to sort of think about where we go for the Democratic side, rather than just trying to pick a Democrat out of the hat that seems like the ideal person. Finally, before we do some Q&A, the other thing I get asked a lot is, whether we're going to survive this. Right? Like, oh my God, this is so terrible. What is happening to this country? Are we gonna like kill ourselves? Are we gonna tear ourselves apart? Are we just gonna fall into the abyss? The only thing that makes me feel better these days, besides watching baby animal videos, which those always, it's really all I have now in my life, is to read history and to look back and realize, like, we play this out all the time. This is a theme in American history that's been part of who we are since our founding. We've always been trying to pull apart. It is remarkable to me about how this country has actually figured out how to stay together. We are an incredibly diverse country that has been able to overcome all kinds of stuff, including a civil war, and come back together. That's amazing. I think the underlying fabric of America remains as strong as it's always been. It's that the politics have become as dysfunctional as they've ever been, at least in our modern memory, right? That part is also understandable because we're at one of these tipping points in history. If you go back and you think about other points in time where we had so many different pressures on this country: cultural change, technological change, economic change, demographic change. It's profound and it's destabilizing. And so we're trying to figure it out. And those tipping point moments are uncomfortable. And the fact is, they're coming also at a time when we have a very low opinion of the institutions that are supposed to be helping guide us and help us navigate these things. Right? And it seems that every day another one of those institutions lets us down, disappoints us. Whether it's the church and the dealing with sexual abuse scandals, whether it's sports and cheating that goes on there, and of course, politics and the dysfunction that's happening there. It feels like, God, nothing's working the way it should. And I do think we have to decide as a country, like, at some point, we've got to break out of our post-World War II mentality, our mid-century institutions, and recognize we are now in the 21st century. Because what we continue to do is we take all this stuff that's happening that's unique, that is a 21st century phenomenon, we're trying to stuff them into these 20th century boxes, and it doesn't fit and it doesn't work, and it's not gonna last. So these boxes have to be redrawn. And that's a choice that all of us have, right? How we behave and how we contribute to redefining them, and how is it that we want it to happen? Do we want to have control over that, or are we going to let someone else have control over that? Or are we just going to let fate control that? And that's why it feels like every moment is high stakes. But fundamentally, I feel like we can do this. I have some faith. I do have a lot of faith, actually. But I also know that it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be ugly. And we're going to endure it, not because it's fun, but because we know when we get to the other side what promise lies ahead. So with that, I'm happy to get questions, comments, accusations, serious, of course. First question.
All speculation is idle, but it's fun.
Right,
So,
that's why we do it.
yeah, so my question goes a little bit further, a little bit past the election, and with the assumption the Democrats are going to take over the House.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen to Pelosi?
Oh, what's going to happen to Pelosi? Excellent question. Somebody's laughing. Okay. So here's the challenge for Democrats. So Nancy Pelosi been in office for quite some time. The leadership in the House overall, if you look at Pelosi and then the number 2 and number 3 in the House, you combine their ages, I think it's like 386 years old or something like that. They're old, and they've been there for a long time. And so the frustration among younger members, it's been there for a while. Like, hello, when are we going to get a chance? There's kind of a no-go sign. There's a glass ceiling here in leadership. And Nancy Pelosi's name has been turned into a pejorative. If you aren't unfortunate enough to live in a district that's a targeted congressional race, you've probably seen ads with the Republican attacking the Democrat as a Pelosi puppet. So her name has become synonymous with being a liberal puppet. Here's the thing that Democrats, again, the many choices for Democrats to decide. There are a number of Democrats who've come out, especially those who are in more conservative districts, and said, look, don't attack me as being a Pelosi puppet. I'm not even going to vote for her, okay? So, forget it. Okay. So let's say Democrats win, and a number of those people said, I'm never voting for Pelosi, also win. So you're asking those folks to make a vote, their very first vote in Congress, to break the one significant promise they made. That's a terrible thing to ask of your most vulnerable Democratic incumbents. Now, if Democrats win by a lot of votes, right, or by a lot of seats, so they have let's say they have a 15-seat majority, and there are 8 of those candidates who said, I'm not voting for Pelosi. Sure, don't vote for her, but she still gets enough votes to win. But what if there are enough of those people who win and there's a small enough margin, but there's no pathway for her? The problem right now for Democrats is I don't know the answer for who's number 2. If not her, then who? There's nobody who's rising up to the challenge. Now, part of the reason they're not rising up to the challenge is that you don't go up against Nancy Pelosi unless you're going to beat Nancy Pelosi, right? What's the line about don't go after the king unless you're going to kill the king, right? And those who've popped their heads up before have found their heads chopped off, right? Or, I think if I were to even speculate out loud about my intention to maybe challenge Pelosi after the election, I wouldn't have someone test my food and check the trunk of my car every day. She's very, very good at what she does. And this is sort of the challenge for Democrats. They're not interested in ousting her because she's bad at what she does. She's really, really very good at keeping that conference together, at getting votes when she needs them, at keeping them from doing some, turning in on themselves as the Republicans have. She's done a much better job corralling her members than John Boehner or Paul Ryan have been able to do. I don't know if anyone else in the Democratic caucus can do that. But there is this swell of energy around wanting someone new, having a new voice, a new face, a new generation, a new perspective. I just don't know who that is. And I don't see anyone who's organized enough to get those votes. So I think this is what's going to happen. The election will occur. If it's a big majority, I think that's enough for Pelosi to hang on. That she will have enough people behind her that you can allow those people who said, I'm never voting for her, to vote against her on the floor. she stays in. If it's a narrow majority, then we've got to figure out how she gets those votes.
So those would be the people that have the office in the basement of the Cannon office building, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, you vote against her
That's right.
and you lose, right? I mean, now look, again, this is a very disciplined person who is able to say right now, she's got a lot of people who are publicly, they're not trashing her, but saying publicly, I am not voting for you. And she's like, okay, that's all good. Yeah, Democrats, you can still give money to them, right? She could if she wanted to. Say, if anyone gives money to any one of those people, I will find you and I will destroy you, right? If you don't give money to somebody who's against me, she's not doing that. She knows this is how you win the majority. But also, imagine they win 35, 40 seats after spending millions of dollars, the Republicans spending millions of dollars saying Nancy Pelosi's a horrible liberal person who, right, running all these attack ads against her, and she's like, so hold on a second. They ran $1 jillion worth of ads against me. Not only did Democrats win, but we won big. I'm sorry, why am I an anchor? What's the problem with me? I don't get it. So it's not very clear cut is the short answer to that. But I think the best thing to look at is how big the majority is, and that will tell you a lot about her chances.
Amy, we have a question back here.
Yeah.
Ken Kraetzer, CBSI Services. Amy, great to have you here. Maybe you could mention the impact of the strong economy. We have a strong stock market. Companies receive a tax cut. People receive a tax cut. Unemployment is at an all-time or maybe a 40-year low. Why is that not as big an issue as we might think it is?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I have two answers for that. The first is what political scientists will tell you is the economy, while important, is not as important in a midterm year as it is in a presidential year. As one political science put it to me, she said, economies elect presidents, presidents elect Congress. Okay? So what that means is the health of the economy is the key driver, or a very key driver in how people view their vote for president. Obviously, if you're in a time of war as well, but the economy is up there as the next most important thing. People's vote in a midterm is driven by how they feel about the president. So that's why his approval rating becomes very important. And just again, as another example of why the approval rating is so important. So I took a look at the president's approval rating in places where they've already voted, these special elections, and how that correlated with how the Republican did. So the president in one of these districts in Pennsylvania that had a special election, his approval rating was 49%. The Republican candidate in that seat got 49%. In the Senate race in Alabama, remember Roy Moore? Unfortunately, we may all remember him. Roy Moore got 48% in that Senate special election. The president's approval rating in exit polls in Alabama was 48%. Okay? So the president's approval rating has much to do with it. Now you would think, of course, well, of course, the president's approval rating is going to be driven by how well the economy is doing, right? If people like the economy, aren't they going to like the president? Yes, it is a factor. You'd much rather have the economy going with you than the economy working against you, right? If you are a president in a crappy economy, it doesn't matter how many awesome things you've done, right? You could jump into that river right now and save a boat of that's sinking with a bunch of small children on it. People will be like, whatever, I don't care, the economy stinks, right? You could solve cancer, the economy's bad. But when the economy is good, it gives you an opportunity, right? People are already feeling like somewhat optimistic. But then there's other stuff that you do. And in the case of Trump, he does Trump. And that's the problem, right? His polarizing nature, policy, behavior is what people are voting on. He is the issue in the campaign. It's a referendum on Trump the person, more than Trump the policies. And when you see where Trump is doing the worst, There are a bunch of polls now that the New York Times has been doing in key congressional districts. And when I look at the ones in suburban America, especially upscale suburban America, places that they're doing real well, right? They look at their 401ks. Some of these places they're going to get hit by the not being able to deduct their property tax or their state tax. But these are people who are doing really well in this economy. And his approval rating in some of these places is 36, 37%. This isn't about, they are simultaneously saying the economy is good and I hate the president. Okay? So that's why the economy writ large is not enough to help give Republicans an advantage.
One more question.
Yeah, right up here in the front.
So you mentioned,
Just got to make sure everybody can hear your important question.
yes, very important. So you mentioned the Pelosi, if not her, then who.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the Hillary and everyone hated her, but everyone hated Trump. And you got this lesser of two evil
Yes,
dynamics
we do.
that's going on in politics right now. With that, what role, if any, do you see a third party taking or
It's a
filling?
really good question. We now are at a point, I'm glad you raised that, because I have talked about that a lot in the past, is, we're in an era of what they call as negative partisanship. Okay? People are attached to their party, their team, not because they really like their party, but because they hate the other side more. I mean, literally, Pew has asked this question in their polling. Okay, how do you identify? Oh, I identify as a Democrat. Okay, well, do you identify with a Democrat because you like their policies and what they stand for, or because you don't like Republicans? And a majority say, I don't like Republicans. And same thing with Republicans say that about Democrats, okay? So, now look, all of us, especially if you are a sports fan or you've been on a team yourself, you know that feeling of like, I don't always love my team, especially when my team really sucks, okay? But I'm never gonna cheer for the other team, right? You're never gonna switch, right? Like, oh, the Nationals are doing really badly. I guess I'll just start cheering for the Phillies now. Of course not. I'm always gonna hate the Phillies. Sorry. Philly people. Hey, come on. You know I'm right. But if that's your only driver, right, of involvement in politics is just making sure that you're ousting the bad people, that's a really unhealthy way to do democracy, right? I mean, that's just it's not sustainable. So can a third party come up and fill in that gap? Because what we are seeing is that what used to be this middle ground, there was, not that long ago, you go back 20, 30 years and you look at the gap between, these are the most liberal Democrats and the most conservative Republicans, and what we had, it looked like this, right? Where you'd have some Republicans who were more liberal than conservative Democrats, and some Democrats who were more conservative than liberal Republicans. So you had this nice middle right here. And then over the years, it's just moved like this, and the middle has gone away. But then you're like, well, what happened to those voters in the middle, right? Well, they've been forced to pick, and they're not happy, right? They're like, I'm over here on this team, and I don't love everything that they do, but it's because I hate this other team so much more. So you would think that gives an opportunity for a third party. The problem is, one, there are structural challenges to being a third party. But the other is that what the parties have done is they have sapped those, whenever like a fledgling third party thing kind of bubbles up, the other, one party or the other comes in and takes it over. It's sort of like Amazon coming in and buying up every little startup, okay? So think about the Tea Party. That could be its own third party, and it could attract populist Democrats, populist Republicans, who are in that camp as their own sort of movement, third party, or the Bernie Sanders party, right? That movement could be its own party. But as soon as they kind of get up to a certain spot, the parties kind of take them over. The other thing we've seen in the last, go back to 2008, the parties themselves are no longer defining what